Thanks for
Hello.
joining. Hi. Thanks for coming on this mini-sode where I don't want to say bullied you, but cornered you very quickly and was like, hey, this is a very interesting conversation dialogue that we're having. I think many people would be fascinated to dive a little deeper into this issue. And so thank you for taking the time to hop on.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a super interesting conversation that I've been fascinated with for a while. So I'm glad there's a platform to talk about it.
Tell us your name and a little bit of your background, just to give context to the listeners of why you're a badass.
Thank you. My name is Jamie Bovshow. I'm a nonfiction TV exec, so I oversee development and current programming for anything nonfiction. So I've worked on everything from premium documentary series to true crime to dating, literally any first season on any platform or network. I've done it. Through that experience, I had the pleasure of helping to create, develop, and sell and produce a big dating show called FBoy Island, starring Nikki Glazer, who's having her moment right now, and she's amazing.
She's amazing.
That was a really awesome show. It was 2 seasons on HBO Max, and then the 3rd season was on the CW. We also had a spin-off series called Lovers and Liars, and it's now in 8+ territories across the globe, which is so crazy and so awesome. But through that experience, I did a lot with casting and a lot with the diligence process. The diligence process being when we cast a nonfiction show, like a dating show, we go through a really rigorous process of background checks, making sure, you're not a serial killer, to psych evals, just making sure that you are, able to go on TV, to my favorite being medical tests. So, making sure you're not bringing anything you can't fix with a Z-Pack on a dating show where there's some, hooking up involved. And another one of my favorites being social media scrubs, which has become a really, really big thing, making sure that our cast members are not racist or homophobic or saying violent things online, and really just making sure that these are people that aren't going to get canceled down the line. And so I have a lot of experience with this. I've learned so much through the process. And I didn't realize that apparently this is just a nonfiction thing. I thought that be scripted and film kind of did that as well. But I think we just found out that maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in a professional group is what I'll say. And this became a hot conversation over the weekend in light of the news of, Karla Sofia Gascón, who's obviously nominated for an Oscar for her role in Amelia Perez. And these racist tweets that were found not that long ago, like four years ago, and some pretty gnarly, nasty stuff she said, including about Selena Gomez. And, she's kind of come out and said, look, I'm not a racist. And it's just been a really interesting response to it all. And should someone be responsible for that scrubbing, for looking through someone's digital footprint and making sure that it's representative of who they say they are, who they're going to be in the marketplace? And as a producer, as someone who would, especially on the independent side, right, it's like you're taking a gamble on somebody potentially. And now oftentimes it's like, oh, well, we have to look at this person's social media following to even consider putting them in your project. Fine. But so then whose responsibility is it? Is it then the producer who should have to scrub through that person's entire history online? Is it the casting director who's potentially recommending it? Or is it the talent themselves that it's like, if you're putting yourself on a public stage, should you be responsible to go back and look at how some things you may have said in the past could be misrepresented, especially if you were young and dumb at some point and said some stuff that is no longer you? Like, how do we create a system of accountability while also giving people permission to grow and change? Because I do believe that, but also holding people at this stage that Karla's on to being truly accountable for the things that she has said. You mentioned it's a legal gray area. And so I'd love to just dive into that a little more.
Yeah. This question of who is accountable is really interesting. I mean, I can only speak with my experience. So in my experience with the nonfiction landscape, we as a production company are essentially contractors. We get a budget and we produce the show for our buyer, whether it's a network, broadcast, a streamer. Part of that process is speaking to the legal team at the network buyer side, and they kind of have their rules of how they want to operate. It used to be dating shows or competition shows or anything where you're like living in a house for a long extended period of time and you're filming in this bubble. You would need to make sure that these are people who are real people. These aren't actors. They're real people who are going to be going through a very rigorous filming process. So you want to make sure these people are not a danger to themselves or others, essentially. And so these buyers have these rules, and those are the rules that we as the production company live by. So, okay, we have to do background checks. We have to do all these checks. Nowadays, it's even like with true crime projects I'm producing. I think that these buyers are a lot more risk averse because of, even if you're a talking head on like an interview style show, they want to make sure that this person isn't going to get in trouble or something's not going to come out. So that's why I'm very surprised that at the very least on the studio side, that this wouldn't be a part of your standards and practices or a part of your kind of, legal framework for when a show is or a movie is being set up. Like, okay, you've got all these deliverables, you've got all these things that you need to do to make sure everything's good. That was a surprise for me. And again, I kind of come from the world of nonfiction, so I don't really know how like scripted or film works. But apparently that's not the case. So then you think, okay, what's the step below? Is it the production company that is responsible? And to your point, a lot of these are indies. A lot of this are, it takes so much work just to kind of get to this point. I don't know if they're the ones that are supposed to be doing this. So then you look below, okay, well, what about these people's teams? You hire publicists, you hire managers, you hire agents. At what point in the process are you saying, hey, it's not that hard to just do a little digital scrub, especially because of how long the internet's been here for and how we all said stupid stuff on the internet when we were younger and maybe not so young. I think for her case, unfortunately, this wasn't like something that she said decades ago. In my experience working with these kind of nonfiction reality stars or reality wannabe stars, it's kind of a generation of people that grew up on the internet. I would say between the ages of like 25 and 35 that are kind of the most incendiary online. These are people who like were in junior high and like, MySpace and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter were new things. And you're just talking to your friends and you're saying stuff that is now considered super offensive that maybe wasn't so offensive back in the day. That feels like, to me, at least in my experience, the most quote unquote popular things that I'm seeing on social media that need scrubbing. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I'm just surprised that there's so many kind of like guardrails up that it seems to have passed so many different people. And maybe it's because these were Spanish speaking tweets. And maybe no one's scrubbing for Spanish-speaking tweets.
I mean, but like Spanish is like one of the most spoken languages in the world. Karla had been, in my understanding, as a working actor before she kind of broke in over here. I get that you can't do this times every single person maybe that you represent, but it's like if you have a project, starts winning a bunch of awards and starts really being a buzzy kind of project out of festivals and now goes all the way to the Oscars, at some point in that trajectory, wouldn't like marketing departments, to your point, publicity departments of these massive studios think to go, let's look at these people that we're going to now do a for your consideration campaign to put them on this stage. That's the part that I don't get it. And I think for me, what really bums me out is it takes away from or at least diminishes the joy and the pride that certain people who have poured everything into these projects have. If it goes up in flames, it's like it's their work that is now attached to a project that has a little bit of a scarlet letter on it,
Well, maybe they did. Maybe they did scrub. And here's where you mentioned the legal gray area.
Yeah.
This is where that maybe came into place. So maybe they did. And what happens is the industry standard for when we do background checks is this. When you do a background check, it's through a consumer reporting agency. And you can get this done often when you're getting a new job and it's like a larger corporation and they say, okay, we want to do a background check on you. So you go through these companies, they're consumer reporting agencies. A lot of these companies recently, they know, oh, let's check your socials. This actually happened to me on my last place of employment. They did a social media scrub on me because they know, hey, this person grew up with the internet. They maybe said some stupid things. Let's see what's in their digital footprint. It's amazing what you learn about a person based on what they've said online. The problem with these consumer reporting agencies is that they are FCRA compliant. So that's the Fair Credit Reporting Act. These are national and statewide legal rules for what you are and aren't allowed to disclose about a potential employee. So, for example, and every state is different, but typically when you're doing a background check, it's only like 7 to 10 years. You can't go back before that. There's specific things that the Consumer Reporting Agency is not going to disclose to you because legally, because they're compliant, FCRA compliant, they're not allowed to. And the same goes for social media. So when you are getting a background check and they're choosing the social media option, they're legally not allowed to ask you to make your social profiles public. Because again, this is like when you're hiring an employee, you're not allowed to do this. So if your socials are already public, great. They're going to be able to find stuff. They're going to be able to Google you. They're going to be able to see what your digital footprint is. They're legally not allowed to tell you, hey, I noticed your Twitter was private. Can you open it up for me? Or can I friend you? Let me friend you on Facebook and see how I can dig around there. And so maybe what happened is that they use these standard consumer reporting agencies that are FCRA compliant and they didn't find it because they can't. Now, again, that's kind of on the top level of like if you're using one of these agencies, it's almost like the employee-employer relationship. Anyone who's on the team, like a publicist or an agent or a manager, can be like, hey, man, I'm going to do a social scrub on you. It's really not that hard if you know how to do it. And I'm going to try to find something that is offensive. So I don't know, maybe they did and they don't know what they don't know because it is such a kind of gray area. And there isn't really a market for like the people you can just hire that isn't FCRA compliant, like me, for example, that you can say, hey, scrub me. I can friend you. I can like ask, to make your profiles public. And then I'm going to find all the crazy stuff that you said when you were a dumb little 13-year-old on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a business a brewing because there should be a consultancy. But frankly, I think even like before you get to that level, say that I'm a person who have been private, but now I want to go into a public stage. I publish a novel. I want to, be a little bit more public facing. I should be able to hire you as well and get ahead of it and say, hey, Jamie, I'm about to launch my first novel. I just got this huge advance. I know there's going to be a lot of attention on me right now. Nobody knows who I am. Can you look through my digital footprint and let me know like what could be inflammatory and what could cause, to make me to lose my livelihood. For some people, that's what it ends up meaning, So it's like it goes both ways. I think that the onus should also be on the people that are aware that things that maybe they said when they were dumb and young, could be misconstrued, and that's not representative of who they are anymore. I think that's fair. I think people should be given the permission to change and evolve and grow from their mistakes. I think if there is a business model to be created there, I think you're onto something because it's going to be more and more necessary, I think.
Yeah, word to the wise, I think, for anyone listening, the digital footprint that you leave, especially if you grew up on the internet, it's vast. There's never going to be any scrubber, as diligent as me or not, that will find everything. I can find any incendiary language, any problematic photos. I can find all of that. I can find things that you're tagged in. What I can't find is if you liked someone else's comment or someone else's post and you liked it. I'm not going to find those because there's really no like program out there that finds that. And those are the things that even if, and this is kind of what you sign when you sign for these like social media scrubs, is like sort of limiting your liability a bit, is like, we're not going to be able to find everything. And so if you can control the things you can control, maybe you might want to consider deactivating your old college Facebook or your old Instagram account that is protected, but maybe, protected tweets that maybe someone who's already your friend can find. And if you become famous one day, they're going to find it.
Yeah.
Or maybe just do a scrub yourself. Like again, if you know how to do it, it's not that difficult. I was so passionate about this on my last show that I actually hired kind of a tech nerd to build me a platform that I could do all of these searches automatically. And this guy is incredible. He created this platform that we basically have that we're not doing anything with, but sounds like we should now,
You should.
of automating it. And that just kind of, the scrubbing it's time consuming. And I do believe that you should always have a human being doing the scrub too, because there's always things that I find that an automated system might not find.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really take that long. It does, but it's kind of like you do one, and you're like, okay, if your Twitter is good, if your Instagram or Facebook is good, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
There's not much there. Like, I can learn a lot from like scrubbing one profile of yours.
Yes, you're like the Olivia Pope of the scrubbing info,
I'm a stalker. That's because deep down, I'm just a big stalker. Like, I can probably find where you live based on your social profile, which is a whole nother topic that I won't even get into, but
that's terrifying.
Don't post pictures in front of your house. Like, I've been able to find people based on like what the front of their house looks like. So like, I'm not even a creepy, crazy person that wants,
actually wants to do something. Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, for a risk-averse industry, like, when we set up independent films and we have our insurance policies we take out, there's, medical exams, cast exams we have to get on certain people that we are getting insured. And it's interesting to me that it's like, okay, we'll insure them to make sure they don't have any, like, diseases. But to your point, nobody does a psych eval on actors. Are you kidding me? Like, if they did, most of those people wouldn't get insured. All this time on the front end negotiating deals for actors, right? Sometimes you finish shooting a film and you still haven't closed that actor's deal. Like, that happens very regularly in my world of independent film. But I also wonder if you're a company hiring someone as an independent contractor or as a loan out of a company, right? Is that a gray area where you could say, well, you're not an employee of our company, we're hiring your company, so like we could legally actually do XYZ,
Yeah. So I went down this rabbit hole because when I started thinking, oh my God, this should be my side hustle because I love it so much and there's such a hole. I looked into this. I am by no means a lawyer here, but I did go to law school and I spoke with a professor. I spoke with some employment lawyers because I really wanted to know, like, if I were to do this, technically it's not illegal, it's not legal, it's sort of this gray area. If you're an independent contractor, you don't have the same protections in place as if you were an employee. Now, that law is changing, actually. So before, like a reality show contestant would be considered an independent contractor, and there's like different boxes you could check that would kind of prove that you were an independent contractor so that there's a little more flexibility.
Right.
Recently, though, this is what I find super interesting, is that back in December of last year, the Labor Board, the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, told Love is Blind, which is a reality show, that their contestants are no longer going to be classified as independent contractors. They are now going to be classified as employees. This, to me, is a really big deal because it sets the precedent, and this might mean future ramifications for things like this. So if reality TV contestants are now considered employees, then they've got protections in place, not just with social scrubbing and maybe me not being allowed to like ask them to make their profiles public, but it's for, whether they can unionize or whether they can have more complaints and protections in place. So yes, to your question, I think if you're considered an independent contractor, you would at this point in time be able to do that. I don't know about the future implications of this situation and if that changes things for both nonfiction and fiction. All that to say, though, this feels like maybe it's the individual's team, because you're working on the smaller level, if you're a publicist or a manager, somebody, if I'm being hired on, you're not my employee, you're not my independent contractor. You're just hiring me to like do this scrubbing for you. So maybe as long as I have paperwork in place that says, hey, I'm not going to catch everything and you're giving me permission to do this, then I think that should be fine. I'm not a lawyer, but it does seem like on the smaller level, it would be manageable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think so. I think on the smaller level, it should be manageable both ways. I think that there should be conversations when you're signing someone. I know it's a lot of work, but I think that perhaps if the onus is on the beginning end, of the front end rather, of working with somebody, of anybody, and being able to get a sense of like, I think especially for actors, people that are, again, camera facing, they are a product. They're the brand, right, that you're selling. So it's like you have to make sure that you as a person who is then making your livelihood selling that person, that you can be authentic in what you're saying. Because if otherwise, it's like it does come back to bite you. And to your point, maybe those managers knew, maybe those the team knew, maybe they didn't know. But now it's like they have to course correct something that, again, if they had just had that conversation on the front end, would that have mitigated this risk for everybody involved? And what does this set as far as an example for others, So we'll be curious to see how this unfolds. I mean, I'm curious if you have any predictions on how you think this will unravel specifically over these next few weeks.
I don't know. I mean, it's such a bummer because on one hand, what you were saying is there's so many people who worked on this film and worked on films. They work their asses off. It's a thankless job for these people. These are the people that aren't going to be standing there accepting an award. These are the people that aren't going to be thanked for doing their role in this. The hundreds of people from, craft services to production assistants to everyone who work on this, to have something like this cloud such a moment is such a bummer, and it's so deflating for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think this conversation isn't saying, hey, you should delete the fact that you're a shitty person. We're not saying that but there are things in place. I think there's a difference between, again, stupid things you said online that don't represent who you are, or getting ahead of things. So, hey, you said some pretty problematic things on the internet that we found. Let's talk about this. Let's get ahead of it. Like, are you still a shitty person or not? Have you learned? Do you need training? I mean, anytime that I work on a show or I'm hired in a company, I have to do sexual harassment training every single time, every single show I'm on. I do an hour of sexual harassment training. Okay, so you'd think there would be a digital footprint training or a racism training or homophobia training, something. Okay, we caught this. Let's talk about it, because I do believe that people deserve to be forgiven. I do believe that people change. And I do believe that who we are is not who we will be. So it's sus. I don't know where this lands. I don't think she's going to win the Academy Award, unfortunately. And I think that clouds what this movie has done for people. And just, the people who've worked on it. It's like a lose-lose all around. It's a bummer.
Yeah.
Hoping that teams of people can help get ahead of this for the future so that this isn't even a conversation, right?
Yeah. 100%. Oh, okay. Well, very illuminating. You were saying earlier that, there is a way to be looking and scrubbing your own social media, your own digital footprint, and making sure that you're being representative. So what are the top 3 tips that you would give for anyone listening as to how they should be thinking about this?
Yeah. So on Facebook, for example, there are ways that you can go into your privacy settings and you can limit past posts. You can make sure that your profile is private, and you can search for keywords really easy. It's the top right corner, there's 3 little dots, and you click it and it says search. If you type in keywords, you'll see what your posts have popped up. Not just your posts, but maybe comments that you made on other people's posts. I just highly suggest doing that, making sure you're private, making sure there's no inflammatory things you said way back when, checking through your photos. I mean, I did that recently. Hey, maybe I went to a college frat party and I dressed in something that could be construed as cultural appropriation, right? I'm nostalgic, so let's just call it Twitter. You can Google Twitter advanced search. You click on that, it takes you to a page, you type in your username, and it says keywords, and you can just chat for any bad words, anything from like words that are considered homophobic now, the N-word, fat, drugs, high, like there's a lot of words that that maybe we used in the past that we shouldn't use anymore.
Yeah.
On Instagram, like, I don't know, no one needs to see what I was doing in like 2013 on Instagram when I was trying to be cool. Like maybe scrub. Oh, and another thing that I would recommend, it's not really about your social footprint, but there's a service called Delete Me that I highly recommend, and it scrubs your addresses, your just personal information that these like credit reporting agencies keep track of and sell to other third-party consumer reporting. Mm-hmm. So I recommend doing programs like Delete Me so that no one can go on and like find out where you live. And then my last thing, this is a completely different topic, but don't put your kids on social media. Don't put their faith in social media. That is a big, big no-no in this digital age. You are doing a lot of damage by doing that. So yeah, I'll leave with that.
Amen. Yes. All right, we'll end on that positive note. Thanks so much for tuning in and doing this life thing with me. If you like the show, please don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm at Carolina Gropa. You can find the show at angleonproducers.com, and I'll see you next week. Beijos.